welcome to my session today about playing with serverless and state. So thankfully you all came along. It's late in the day, we're all tired, so it might not be the best time at looking at some code and a lot of code. So who am I? Well, my name is Karl. I work as a consultant. I'm a bit of a nerd. A bit of a fun fact is that I'm a huge baseball fan since a little kid. I've used Azure heavily since 2009, and I enjoy talking with techies at conferences, so if you see me walking about, come say hi. So what are our agenda for this session? Well, our agenda for this session is that we'll first have a look at what we're going to create. Then we'll do a 2-minute quick intro to Azure Functions, for those who don't know anything about it, but I hopefully assume people know it, because that's a little prerequisite. Then we'll have a bit of a look into what entity functions are, and then we're going to close this PowerPoint presentation and start with the coding. The coding will be a bit of speed coding, puzzling snippets, and hopefully not too many errors, but there will be some, I expect. So what are our tasks? Well, what are we going to create? Well, we'll create a simple, create a simple chatbot using Azure durable functions that can store its own state and remember our chat session. And we can use that state to create a very simple menu navigation. So in a way, we want to create something like BotFather. So what are BotFather? BotFather is a bot by Telegram itself. It's used to create and manage other bots. It has a simple menu navigation that uses chat messages as input, and alongside commands displayed as buttons. We do not have time to implement something that works nearly as well as this, but at least we'll try to get a menu up and running. So the Telegram bot API, it mainly uses polling to let bots receive messages, but they also have support for webhooks. All you need to do is register a URL that Telegram can send an HTTP post message to whenever a new message is sent. So for this bot, I have already registered a URL for a function named Telegram entity. That means that the function we're going to create shortly also needs to have the same name. I've done this so that I do not have to do the registration live on stage. It's not the end of the world if I would have to do it, I'm just lazy. So what are Azure Functions? So, well, I assume most of you know this, as I said, but for those of you who don't know, I will do a very quick and dirty introduction. So here are Azure Functions in 4 sentences. Functions are short-lived blocks of code. They are executed when an event that I listen to are fired. It scales automatically to meet the demand it scales automatically to meet the demand to process all events that occur. And it does not store any state between its executions. It's one of the most popular serverless offerings from Microsoft. So I just said that it doesn't store any state between its executions. So how can one use Azure Functions to store current state like our chatbot? One way would be to store this in a database and retrieve it every time it executes. Or we could do the same, just with table storage. Or we could use Azure durable functions. Under the hood, a durable function uses a storage account to store its state. So it's almost the same as table storage. But what are durable functions? How do they differ from normal functions? Well, they're not that different. They're an extension of Azure Functions that enable us to run stateful functions in a serverless environment. It runs stateful workflows using an orchestrator function, and it can run stateful entities using an entity function. And stateful entities is what I plan to use to create a very little simple bot in a few. We could go into a deep dive on how durable functions are able to restore its state and start executing where we left off last time. And that could be an entire talk by itself. But we need all the time we can to create the bot itself. I've sort of timed it to half an hour if I haven't no errors. So for the purpose of this talk and coding session, I just wanted to show that it uses a combination of blobs, queues, and tables, blobs, queues, and tables in a storage account to make all this happen. What are entity functions? Well, they're durable functions that store their own state. They are inspired by the actor model and are comparable to virtual actors. And you can address and access them using a unique entity ID for each entity. And each unique entity always executes messages serially. So for our bot, our chat sessions will be processed in parallel, but each session will have its own unique entity, and that will process all the messages serially. So in this example here, that's just basically a screenshot. That's a hello world example from Microsoft on an entity function. And it has methods to add and reset and get the value that are stored as a property. Under the hood, entity functions are basically just JSON serialized documents that are stored in a table storage. Each entity function that are instantiated will have a unique entity ID. The entity ID is used to access a particular entity. And it's a simple string put together by the name of the entity itself, in this case, our Telegram actor, and a unique key for each instantiated entity. And for us, that will be the entity key, that will be our chat session ID. Together, they become a unique ID. Oops. This one is malfunctioning today. Yeah, you have two ways of accessing an entity function, calling and signaling. And it's only the orchestration client that can both signal and wait for a response from an entity function. The other clients, we have 3 others, they can't do it. They can just signal. The other ones can wait for a response as well. So that was 7 minutes in introduction for slides, and I've talked as fast as I can in very bad English because I want to get started on the coding part. So if you like, you can find a Telegram bot called Rebecca the bot, or use this QR code, or search after a bot that is called Øredev something. I can't remember what I named it. And you can test it along as we go, and I deploy stuff. So let's see when the screen comes back on. So, okay, what I have done here is that I basically just started a new Visual Studio project, used the durable function template from Visual Studio. I have added a few packages, NuGet packages. One is a library called Convo that is used for processing messages and commands for chatbots. And it handles and routes the commands to command handlers for me. So I don't have to do all that logic for this demo. The other libraries are telegram.bot, that is a Telegram API for .NET, and is one of the best ones available. So what we'll first do is we'll just get rid of all these things that we're not going to use. And we needed to name our function Telegram entity, because that was what I have already registered. I'm going to return an iAction result instead. I'm going to use HTTP request instead of the other one. And here is the one I'm going to do. I'm going to not use the orchestration client. I'm going to use iDurable entity client instead. And let's add a snippet, one of very many snippets this time. There we go. So what does this snippet do? Let's have a look at it. The code, it's as large as I can get it, but if you come a bit closer, you can see it. I can't really zoom in more because then I would lose it would be too large for me to work on. But what we do is that when Telegram sends us a post message, we check if it has a body. And if it has a body, we deserialize it. We get an update class. The update class is a Telegram-specific class. It contains both messages, edited messages, and callbacks from Telegram. And then we try to get the chat ID out from that message that we received. We can get that using the message, or the edited message, or the callback query. So I just test for everything. If the chat ID is valid, in my case just better than 0, then I create an entity ID using the name Telegram actor and the ID of the chat session itself. Then I try to signal an actor using this ID. So if it does not exist, it will be created. If it exists, I will get the previous instantiated actor. So I'm going to create this actor now. And this actor is just going to have one method. It's going to be So I'm just going to use a tuple to send the data in, just because, again, I'm lazy. I don't want to just create a separate class for that. And then I'm going to create a new class. That inherits this. And this class is the actor itself. Since this actor is serialized as JSON, I just want to make sure that everything is serialized, so I'll do just annotate it. With opt-in, so every field gets serialized. Just a matter of not forgetting to serialize something. And then I will need a constructor. Sorry. Because I want to save the logger for later. And Visual Studio some way do castle call logging instead of what I really want. So I just added that. And there we go. We save our logger. I'm going to add a field that we're going to store just for the fun of it. Then I'm going to just annotate this with a property called some counter, because I want to sort that as that value. Let's see what we're going to do now. Yes. Then we're going to have a snippet. This is the actor function itself. So what happens here in this entity function itself? So what happens here is that this gets triggered when the actor gets signaled, and it will basically instantiate it and pass along the log. So it will call the constructor and pass along the logger for me. So each time it gets a signal or gets called on, this function will be ran. And just for the fun of it now, we can just do some simple checking if it works with Telegram. Telegram bot client. This is a variable that I basically have already made ready on the Azure function I'm going to deploy to. So what I want to do is I want to increment just this counter. And then I want to send the counter back to you as long as you send me a message. And since we sent in a tuple, the chat ID is the long in the tuple, so that's item 2. There we go. Just build this, see if there's no build errors. Just check here as well. Yeah, it all seems good. So basically what will happen now is that whenever we get a message, we call the actor for your session, and it will just respond with how many times you've called it. So let's try publish that. And I've already set up a publishing profile for our function, just so I don't have to do it right here, right now. See, started. Yeah, it's a bit slow, but anyway, let's continue because that will work hopefully very soon, and I will check it. But let's continue. We don't have a lot of time to do a lot of things. So let's start working on some more Telegram, basically boilerplate code. This code is mostly snippeted, so it hopefully will go fast, but we need it to better interact with Telegram, since that's the protocol we're going to use. Let's see, have it been tested? Yeah, so I've done this a few times now. There we go. It stores how many times I've called it, and if you guys do it, you should get another number than me, since we get different entities. So this boring class here is basically boilerplate, but we'll do it anyway. This is something that inherits on the Convo command handler. That is the library that will handle our Telegram commands, and will give us the options that we will render as buttons on Telegram. So what we will do is we will translate our message into a Convo message and send that into the Convo library, and then that will try to invoke the correct command for that message that we receive. Yes, so we'll the constructor of this handler is that it basically takes a list of commands that either you have in your dependency injector or you add yourself, and it will try to register or update that command into the Convo command handler. So here I set up the Telegram client, and basically like we did before. And now we need to have the handler, message handler. So this is the main method of this class. It will get the message that we have from Telegram. It will have a context, that's our data storage. And in the end, that will be our actor. And it will see that if it's a message or an edited message, it will be sent to our method that will translate it from that type of message. But if it's a callback query from Telegram, and that's what we're going to use the most, since buttons are callback queries in Telegram, it will send it to our callback query method instead. But in the end, they will all end up in the same method in the Convo command handler. Let's do the callback handler and then the message. Those are the two main methods that I just talked about, basically. So they all do the same. They send our Convo message into handle message. The only difference is that they take it from different parts of the, they take it from different types of messages from Telegram. Then we're going to do some more boilerplate. Just easily, no, sorry, we won't have that one. We don't, if there's any errors, we'll just ignore it. We send response and do an update. So what the response and the update does is very similar. But it will take the option responses generated from the command handler that we will create very soon, the commands that we create very soon, and it translate that into Telegram keyboard markups so that we can use it as buttons. So let's have a look here. Yes, it looks okay. But that's basically what it does. It just checks that the data is good, and it sends the message. Then we're going to extend our actor with some more information, since we're going to use that. I said that the actor itself will be the data context, and that is the Convo context. So Convo needs some data stored somehow. You can store it in many ways, but I will use the actor itself to store it. And it's basically just a set of properties. That I just do a little bit of a copy pasting here and add some annotation, and we should be set. Go. And I just want to store them as some lowercase variables. So bear with me on this. So the thing is that Convo will store the chat ID for the chat. It stores the alias of you as a user, your name if you have one, and if you're authenticated or not, because Convo supports authenticated, very simple authentication, where you can say that your command needs you to be authenticated as a user to be able to use. And it has a way of handling special replies to your button commands, so it needs to know which action or command it should reroute your reply to. So I'll just, we also need to do, the Convo itself needs to do a way of resetting your context, so we need to do that as well. So what we need to do is to set alias to just the message we received. Name to the same. And is authenticated to false, since if we reset, we want to log out. And What else do we need? Expected reply action ID needs to be no. So name, thinking, reply ID, that's good. So we'll remove this bot client. So when we get a message into the actor itself now, we want to invoke the Telegram handler instead. And it uses logger and an normal. And it uses the update message that we just received. That's data. That's first item in the tuple. And we need to send the data storage context. That's the actor itself. So this. And every time we get a message, we just also store our chat ID. Yeah, since that is a string. So we should be good now to just have the basics of the Convo library set up. I expect nobody to know about the Convo library because I created it special purpose for this talk. And not for this talk, but I extracted from other project for this talk because I've used it in a lot of other projects. And right now, what will happen? I'll just set the publish just so we can have a look at what will happen as long as we publish. So now we'll get the message. As before, we'll signal the entity, and the actor itself will then use the handle message because, well, when we signal the entity, we say that we want to call handle message as the signal itself. Then we just store our chat ID, increment our counter. We don't even use it anymore, but still I increment it. Then we'll handle the message using the Telegram handler. So after that, the Telegram handler will take over our work. So right now, the publish has succeeded. So if I test now, I hopefully should get the standard menu from Telegram. No, from Convo. So basically, test was an unknown command for Convo. So I got a list of predefined commands for the Convo library. And that is basically authentication, resetting, and me, that's a debug command that gives me the information about my current state. So let's authenticate. And here we see a first example of how it handles our reply. And my password is Hunter2. If somebody's old enough, they might know why. So that's the same password for everybody of you if you want to authenticate. Hunter2. A lot of asterisks. And then I can, since I'm authenticated, I can see my own current state in the actor. So basically here I see the JSON document that is serialized for my actor at the moment. I don't have an alias, name is null, and yeah. Yeah, I have a bug here, but it doesn't really matter right now. The chat ID is saved. So basically what happened here is that the reset function is not working. But anyway, let's continue, because we don't need the name and the alias to continue working on this. I want to create a hello world command that we can use. So we have 10 minutes left, so I think we'll be good, but we're cutting it close. So I will create a command that I call echo command that will just basically echo what I say to it in a reply. Sorry. There we go. And the convo command itself needs to know some information. It needs to know if we require authentication, what's their name, and what is the command it should reply to. So I'll just set that very quickly. And the description. And then if you require any authentication, and that is false in this case, because people should not need to be logged in to do this. Then we'll handle the command itself, because these commands are basically under the hood like IRC command. It's / commands. So I've said that I will respond to a command echo. So whenever I get a command echo, it will go into this handle command methods. So if we don't have any arguments, then we're just going to present the user with the main menu. And the menu itself is a response message. Response. And then just return that for now. And the convo also have something called an options response that gives you the user more options. This could be more commands in a hierarchy, in a menu navigation, or in our case, it would be a bunch of buttons. Sorry, there we go. Reply options. We are going to have one option that we call that we're going to call reply. There we go. And our option that exits our menu navigation, basically. Then what we're going to do as well, we will delete the originating command that made this menu message happen. Sorry. Just so I don't want any clutter on my chat. And that's about it. And then if we do get arguments, we need a way of handling that. So right now we just assume that we have at least one argument now. And do a very simple switch case on the string itself. That will be the reply and the exit that I've used above. There we go. Just break on that one as well. So what we'll do on the reply one, because that when we get into reply, we want to route the user into sending a reply that gets handled in our handle reply command handler, handle reply handler. So what we need to do is that we can use the context, since Convo uses context, and set that we are going to expect a reply action on this command itself. And we're going to store some data that we want to do. Using a key. This data is stored in the actor itself, so I've basically cheated and created a JSON document in the JSON document. So it basically is, it's a dictionary. We want to store the originating message. And then we want to return a new reply. Sorry. And I want to update the originating message. Yeah, command message I did. There we go. So basically that is what I'm going to respond with when I get a reply command. Yes. And then for the exit command, very simple. We're going to just delete the command, the menu item itself. That's the command that is the originating message here. There we go. So now we have a way of handling the commands, where if we don't have any arguments, and if we do have any arguments, we will route them back to the response handler, reply handler, sorry. So here I just check, do we have the flag, if we get the reply, if we have the flag we just set, I want to do something. If not, just ignore it. So in the context I get, I check if the data has key, sorry. And if that is the case, I continue. Then string. I want to store it or get it. And I want to, after that, I want to delete it, so that you don't get back into reply handler again. And after that, I want to actually create the response itself. I just use null for a response right now because the Convo library uses nulls if it should not do anything. So new options response, where the reply options is, sorry, I want to start with the text. The text is the reply itself, since we want to echo it. And then the reply options is basically going back to the menu. And then so we're just going back to echo without any arguments. And then I want to update, basically. I want to update the message. update, yeah, sorry. Update message ID, that is going to be the originating message ID. That is the left-hand side on the bot. And I want to delete the reply itself, the user input. And there we go. So I then need to go in back to the handler here and register it, since I don't have any dependency injection right now. Don't think I've forgotten anything. Let's build and see. That should give us a clue. But hopefully that will be it right now. I see I'm running a bit over time. Yeah, so let's try to just publish this and see if it works, and get a menu using entity function, where we basically tricked it into becoming a database that we can use in just a standard third-party library and other thing. So let's see if it when it has been published. I can just have a look at myself on the console if I like. Oh. Slow Wi-Fi, I think. There we go. And then it needs to warm up, so that will also take some time. There we go. So now we have the echo command as well. And you can just do that. You know what? Sorry. I've forgotten something, and I'm lazy. Just publish a completed version. So that's the way of when I live code, there's always something that happens, and I don't have my alter with me. I have not made any sacrifices, so I was punished. It did not work. But I have on plan B. I have already done this, so I'm just deploying that. Since we are over time, I don't want to debug it right now. So let's see if, yes, come on. There we go. So in this example that I just deployed, basically in plan B, I have a few other commands that where actually I demonstrated more usage of this way of storing state. And that is watch lists and stuff that I have for, let's say, stock information that I use personally. But let's check on the echo command that I created. Pick an option. And it replied. I can go back to the menu, and I can exit. And this is done using both the Convo library, and it's used using entity functions that stores our state for us. No need to do any database stuff. You just need to write to the properties on the entity itself, and it gets stored. It's very easy. And since I wanted to store some dynamic data, I just created a string object dictionary that I can basically put everything in, as long as it can be serialized into JSON. And a better example is basically a stock watch list that I've done using this. So right now, I don't have any items on my list, but it's basically a CRUD application. So I can search, I get a reply, and it was added on the list. And I can search again. Let's say you search something that contains T in it. There's web step, and there are in the list. It's the same technique. It's stored in the entity itself, and every time the entity gets invoked, it gets restored from the table storage, and I can basically play around with it as I want. No need to do anything database. And yeah, I can of course remove stuff, and view manage that. So yeah, this is live coding that went to plan B. So that's me. Thank you.